you were working your main job and decided to break free and do this full time. In that transition, or maybe beforehand, did you dabble in crypto or get as you were learning stuff? Were you evaluating that space,
I
and then how
was
did you
I,
get back?
I was in I was in a very weird small shit coin. Maybe I come up with the name. I don't even remember the name now.
We shall
Oh,
not speak the names of trade coins on here.
yeah, it was just like a small gaming coin, basically. They had a really nice marketing team, and I just fell for it completely. I was in it till I think like 2022, something like that, and
Hmm.
till then I'm completely Bitcoin only. So ever since I started my podcast, I've been Bitcoin only. So far, Bitcoin only that I don't even really like. I talked with a guy that kind of tries to do in Europe Bitcoin debit cards to like pay for stuff, and they have a zero fiat policy. They make it so that you can hold Bitcoin literally to the last possible moment in self custody. And I like that idea where you just have a zero fiat policy, and just for the last thing where people have to kind of, okay, I have to pay him in fiat, then only then you quickly change Bitcoin to fiat and then pay him. I like that approach a lot, and I kind of go about it in the same way of like, I want to have Bitcoin as long as possible and don't have any fiat without going into debt, which is a whole different topic.
Indeed. Well, that's what fiat is built for, right? Like it's 100% oriented towards getting you into debt. So yeah, but that George interview was great, man. I mean, it was really, he's such a fascinating guy. I think you left one of the key characteristics of being the most interesting guy on the planet is you have to survive too. you know,
Right.
and like I think that guy has sort of, if he's a cat, he's only got about 2 or 3 lives left, best I can tell. But yeah, I mean, just super humble guy. And when I was seeing him kind of before he was on your show, like I was kind of like, where is this guy coming from? But he was just always so positive, and he was just kind of like, there wasn't like this typical like, oh, you got to watch out for everything, the world's gonna melt down and blah blah. It was always just kind of like life's good, and it kind of it resonated with me. I really appreciated about him. So
He has an extremely positive attitude, and the important thing is being cheerful. And I like the message also what Sale is saying, basically of like, let's build the biggest building and not let's tear other ones down. I think both will happen. I think like if we just really focus on building Bitcoin, at some point fiat will not make sense anymore. If that's like 10 years, 100 years, 2000 years, I have no clue. But being focused on building the biggest building and not tearing all the other buildings down is like a big thing for me, like being like really positive and cheerful.
yeah, for sure, man, for sure.
Yeah, Bodine was very hopeful about the future, and I think he gets that. And Daniel, you were just on Robin Sayers' podcast, just released today,
Yeah,
and I listened to that. And to your point, the idea of the fourth turning came up. It goes back to your book that you wrote, The Great Realignment, which I had to get my mind around like about a year ago when we were talking about this stuff. I was really coming from a place of a bit of that doom and gloom of stuff's going to just have to break down and fall apart, and then from the ashes Bitcoin will just simply be there. And I realized that's not really how it's going to work. Like we've said before, areas here and there are going to break. If they can't realign, they'll break, or they just won't make sense, they won't work. The big system, there's so many big parts to it, they're not going to just collapse. They're going to have, and there's smart people working for them, as they are right now already. They are in the process of realignment. And it
yeah.
may just be getting off zero. It may be reorienting all of their financial service offerings and what that means to them. And then they're just changing their business model over time, basically. And so that the great realignment really is that it's not a big, you know, bad, bad people make bad times. It's going to just be like, no, it changes, but it's a constant flow and it's going to get better. And for those of us in and on Bitcoin, I mean, the earlier the better, but life will get just better.
Yeah, totally, dude. I hope so. I mean, that's sort of the working theory. Hey, thanks, Johnny. Yeah, check it out, man. It was actually, I watched it, sort of. I kind of look at myself on camera. I'm just like, really? who is this guy? What is he talking about? Like, why is he rambling right now? But I mean, hopefully people can get some good information out of it. People, I like bringing a positive message to the Bitcoin space. Just I was on a Twitter Spaces with Dark Side of the Moon. He's a really, really great guy and part of this kind of group that I'm in with. These guys are all way smarter than me, but every once in a while I kind of chime in on one of their spaces, and it's just is because there's a guy Simon Dixon. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's a really popular streamer. He's an old OG Bitcoiner guy, but he is always just like lizard people. Everything's about to die. The great chess game is coming to a conclusion. We're all going to be enslaved. Mind robots and whatnot. And it's just like, yeah, it just maybe. I mean, it's all possible, right? Like nobody can predict the future. I kind of look at the world and I go, I just don't see it unfolding that way. So
And
yeah,
it, I think this was always the case. You're like if 80% of the world works on a farm, and then you kind of bring the tractor in, people are like, oh shit, like he takes my job, and everyone thinks everything will go to bust, and like the tractor's the only thing that is there anymore. I think it's just like if you look, and I think we made even this example in our podcast, Daniel. I'm not sure where we made this example with flying. Like all of the viewers that listen to our podcast and listen to this live stream, they can probably afford like one ticket to somewhere else.
yeah,
And the richest man alive, like 200 years ago, couldn't do that.
yeah.
I don't know like when the plane was invented, but like 200 years, I'm pretty sure couldn't
It was
fly.
definitely within the last 200 years.
So it's every invention makes humanity go a little bit forward. The same with Bitcoin, the same with all of the things. So I feel like our life is now better than it was in 1700s. Like
Oh,
I
yeah.
have a weird feeling about that we are more hygienic, that we have more technology, that we have a more free life, and all of those places. Like if you want to be a random dude, like if you have the chance of waking up in the 1700s or 2025, and you don't know as which person you wake up tomorrow, which time zone will you choose? Like
Yeah.
2025, pretty obvious.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Well, I mean, if anyone's ever had a wisdom tooth taken out, I go, just go back about 150 years and see what that process felt like. Because, I've had my wisdom teeth go bad. I had one of them got infected and I was miserable, and but if you think about like what was that like in, I don't know, 1825, you go, oh, my wisdom tooth is bad, you might die. Like, it's not like you go, oh, I took some pills and I was sick for a couple days and now I'm getting better. And then, the dentist like very gently put me to sleep and then yanked this thing out. And then I woke up and I had to put cotton in my mouth and I couldn't eat solid food for 3 days. Like, those were not your problems then. You're just like sitting there suffering for like weeks going, oh
Hope
God.
you don't get infected and die.
And then if you don't get an infection and die, and then you got some butcher who's sitting there in a barber chair, just like, I think I can knock that out. Let me just get my hammer and my chisel and I'll just poke that thing out real quick. And I mean, it would have just been dreadful. It was like short,
Shot of
brutish, and
whiskey.
nasty. And so like if you had no problems, if you never got sick, if you never, then life was still rough. I mean, you're carrying stuff, you're working, it's hard. It's a hard existence.
What
So
the
yeah,
worst of what I see and what's been happening is like I'll see like the middle class getting pulled down, like with inflation, money debasement, things getting more expensive, and the Cantillon effect, where the money just trickles down, but it doesn't get to us all, or it's more expensive for us to use. There's a divide in the middle class where there's a wider and flatter lower wide base, and then those wealthy at the top are doing better and better and better, and so there's like a, a divide in the classes, and there's no good solid big middle class the way we remember thinking of it. um, so I have that concern. Bitcoin fixes that. My biggest angst about the legacy financial system has been this stretching of the middle class, pressure on the middle class, and you see people slipping downward. In my job, I see folks on the street and stories they'll tell, and the drugs are worse, and the money is worse, and the fiat food is worse, and they slip into that, or they
Mhm.
get accustomed to living in a box, or they get accustomed to homelessness. So I see it and I deal with it at my work, while wealthy or other people can spiral upwards.
Yeah.
Um,
They
Bitcoin
can manage
fixes
their addictions way better.
Yeah. Now my time preference is much better. I could say, categorically you can look at the between addiction or mental illness and other things happening. A lot of the folks that I manage, there's a definite time preference problem,
Yeah.
impulse control.
Yeah.
But there's that. But Bitcoin fixes that. That's where I have hope because, like in my family or friends that I have, if they get to complaining about how the state of the world and how things aren't good and what they're, da, 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 and it's like, okay, step back for a moment and look at the lives we're living. There are hardships, and we deal with hardships, but between technology or certain life standards and accessibility of stuff, like you said, we have access to so much more that it has healed a lot to us. Or you could say it's easy for us to complain when we kind of have it pretty good. Um, Not that there aren't concerns.
Yeah, for sure. Well,
Uh,
I mean, like what Robin was just saying, like, 100 years ago, try getting on a plane, right? I
yeah,
mean, the Wright brothers did it, but that took some building. But yeah, I mean, even in 1950, if you're going to fly across the country, that's like, people go, "Oh, like how come we can't have this anymore?" I'm like, "You can. You just got to pay $10,000 per ticket and have 20 people on the plane." So, it's like, yeah, they used to have like dinner service and you had a smoking lounge on your plane or whatever, but that's because that's the only way they could afford to fly the damn thing. And nowadays it's like routine, like Robin just said, I can literally go down right now, drop about 600 Uncle Sam bucks on the counter, and I can be in Europe like in 12 hours. And you go, that's just remarkable. That's amazing. What an amazing thing. And so, yeah, to your point, Fritz, like, the middle class is definitely getting stretched out, but that's kind of the nature of the competitive resource game, right? So I think Bitcoin fixes that. It protects everybody from that debasement. And that's the thing that, when you talk
yeah,
about somebody getting squeezed or reductions in quality or, the food's getting worse and all this kind of stuff, I don't think those are intentional things. I think that, well, I mean, they're intentional in that they go, well, either we reduce the quality or we stop selling as much, or either, like there's a limit to how much you can improve your goods to keep up with inflation. So
yeah. Johnny mentions air conditioning. Air conditioning for when when
mm,
I've pondered living in the South and I visited the South and I'm like, I could live here. And then in the summer, it's like, oh my goodness. Like I just I got to sit in the shade and sip my tea. There's nothing to do. Air conditioning changed the lives of so many people too. Um, but anyway, simple things like that, innovations where we just, yeah, we got it all right. Um,
I think people also love to complain about their lives currently and romanticizing the past. I've seen
right.
that a lot where people romanticize what happened in the past, just leaving out the bad stuff and just only focus on the small good things. And I love the plane example that you brought because actually Bitcoiners also make that example, and I'm getting mad at them when they do because they say like, oh, you see how nice they were sitting in the planes early on and how great those dinner tables were. Yeah, because only the top 1% could fly. Now, the average Joe can fly, and of course, he will not fly as the top 1%. And it's the because at that time the normal person couldn't even get on to this plane. So I think there's a lot of nuance to it, and people are just complaining. And even Bitcoiners are not free from that complaining sometimes.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
like you said, I think people really do romanticize the past a lot. And there was a time there on my timeline where people were on my Twitter timeline, I should say, or my X timeline, where people were talking about how come we don't have construction like this anymore, and how come we don't have these great cathedrals and yada yada yada. I'm like, do you understand, like most of the shitty buildings are gone, right? Like it's not like they all built everything that was built back in 1650 was like this amazing palace. It's like people were living in shacks that were covered in animal hides, and those things rotted, and that's why they're not there anymore. So you don't get to walk down the street and look at all the rotten old crappy construction that was going on just to keep people out of the elements, and a dirt floor and rats running around and all this kind of stuff. But for the ones at the top of the hierarchy that got to build those amazing palaces, the thing that's unique about that time frame is labor was really, 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 really cheap. Like you could have 10,000 people working on your house and it would cost you the same as it would you have to have 10 people working on your house today. The materials were really expensive. So the only people that could afford the materials were the ones that could go get marble and all this kind of stuff. And then they could find the labor for practically free to spend all kinds of time making that stuff look really great. So you go, well, why was the craftsmanship so great? Because people were living in just abject poverty for the most part. And so the people got elevated to a craftsman status, got to spend a lot of time working on crafting neat things for people that have lots and lots of resources. So if you're thinking about like pining for the days when, it's like, well, that if you want to go back to that time, that means 90% of you live in a hut where you go take a dump in a hole in the backyard, and you got rats running around and everything else. And then, people like Jeff Bezos get to have this amazing cathedral with this incredible craftsmanship. So it's like, let's like take a moment to pump the brakes and just pause and kind of go, yeah, construction isn't as great as it was in some areas, but what we have is pretty solid, man. Like, there's a great big windstorm here in New Mexico the other day, and I was sitting in this nice little cozy house kind of going, huh, yeah, I am absolutely protected from those elements. This isn't like some sort of amazing architecture. This is just engineered stick frame, kind of crap American housing, but it works great. Like, I did not blow away in the wind. I did not get wrecked by a flash flood. So, yeah, I think everyone needs a little perspective sometimes.
Yeah, especially in America. In America, we sort of get used to what it's like here, and I don't know how it's like in Vienna or Germany, but we're sort of used to a certain, uh, a lifestyle. I think I could be living in Ukraine right now. My great grandfather. Now my family started in northern Germany, well, maybe Cologne area. Excuse me. And for whatever reason, fled south and then east and settled in Kiev for a moment, then went down to Odessa to the south. And turn of the century, back like 1908 or something, they fled and they took a ship to Ellis Island and then made a beeline for whatever reason to Nebraska. Now, for my great grandpa, I mean, their lives were probably, for whatever reason, like it was the Russian pogroms or whatever unrest was going on. They were like, we got to leave. We got to flee. We literally, what we have on our backs or we can carry in our suitcases, we're getting out of here. And so anyway, my family fled and then ended up hustling and struggling and working hard day by day as basically ranchers in Nebraska, and then ended up in Idaho, yada, yada. Anyway, here I am in America feeling like life has its challenges, but I cannot compare it to what my grandparents went through or my great grandparents went through.